Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me. I'm Jill Bloom, Group Publisher of Roofing Contractor, and welcome to our Best of Success podcast show. It's always an honor to have with me my good friend Trent Cotney, partner with Adams and Reese. Trent, as always, thanks for joining me.
Hey, Jill, it's great to see you.
Well, Trent, before we even get started in some of the topics that I know are making your phone ring, um, I was just telling you last week I had an opportunity to walk a really huge automotive roof with some friends of ours in the industry to record some safety videos. And as it turned out, I kind of had my own little safety issue where I got stung by a yellow jacket. And you just never know when something's going to happen. I'm not allergic, so I was okay. I was able to get off the roof okay. But I think that there's some really great takeaways there from a legal perspective that everybody should really know. So what would you share with everybody if they had a worker that got stung by a bee?
Yeah, and this is, believe it or not, this is a more, a common occurrence. I have a lot of different safety related issues with, crew members, foremen, project managers having to deal with insects or other animals on a roof. And, glad to hear you're okay. I hate to hear
Yeah.
that happened to you. That's awful. But, you know, in the past, I can think of, bees, wasps, your example of yellow jackets. But we've had other things like bats, raccoons, squirrels, rats, other things that could potentially be in a roof. So from a safety perspective, what you want to do is be able to have a protocol in place. If you spot an issue, you want to stand down until you can make sure that you've addressed it with your crew leader, your foreman, your safety director, figure out, how you should go about dealing with this, maybe call outside help to remove whatever the potential issue is. You also want to make sure that you have a process or procedure in place to deal with a potential allergic reaction. So that can include, emergency response protocols as well as, having, certain medicine on hand to prevent, the allergic reaction from expanding to something a little bit more threatening. One other thing I would say is contractually, you want to make sure that you, within your contract with your customer, you are exempting out any issues related to wildlife removal or insect removal and or damage that's caused by them. So I had
Yeah,
one,
I mean that's an additional cost, right?
yeah, absolutely. I had one situation where there are bats in the roof, right? Well, clearly you got to stand down, you got to get them out, you got to clean out some of that area, that's additional cost, right? And you need to be
Sure.
able to pass that on to the customer. The other side of that is from the warranty side. You also want to exempt out any damage that's caused by insects, vermin, or other animals. So, classic example, birds love some adhesives and coatings. They love to peck at that stuff. And I can't tell you how many times I've had birds destroy a roof system. So you want to make sure that your warranty isn't doesn't cover things like that and specifically exempts it because it can be an issue.
Wow, who knew that birds loved that's something that they would go after. Well, we just wrote an article too. There was a contractor that died. They got attacked by a bunch of bees. So
Yeah,
yeah, it like you're
it's
correct.
it's a real issue, especially and it can happen on any roof system, but especially with older homes or older roofs, you've got no idea what's under that, right? And it could be harboring all kinds of stuff. I had snakes. One issue of snakes there, and that's you're talking about potential danger, not only from
Yeah.
being bit, but from losing your balance.
Yeah.
But it's a big issue. You never know what's there, and there's one thing I've learned in roofing is that you can always expect the unexpected.
Yeah, for sure. That's yeah, I mean at least we were up on a large, low slope roof, but like you said, you just if you were up on a steep slope, it's a whole nother hazard.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm glad you mentioned that. I've had a lot of issues with crew members slipping on underlayment. And other before the roof is finally, like, for example, if you got a steep slope roof with shingles, right,
Yeah.
and you just have underlayment on there and it's rain, it can be real slippery. So you need to make sure. That's why huge believer in safety, making sure that you're tied off, making sure that you got the proper PPE on, that you're doing everything you can to protect your crew. But just be very mindful when you're in, especially this season where you've got heat and then you've got this transition from a cooler night to a warmer morning. It can create condensation. It can also, we're in storm season here in Florida. You get these torrential downpours, then all of a sudden your job sites turn into a bunch of, a slippery mess. So
Yeah.
just be very careful out there because that's another big concern this time of year.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, I got a couple other things I wanted to ask you about, Trent.
Yeah.
So you had mentioned there's something called venue choice of law and dispute resolution that everybody needs to know about. Again,
Yeah.
whether
So
doing drywall or wall and ceiling work or roofing work.
yeah, absolutely. And, it is, I review hundreds of contracts a month, and some of them are drafted by contractors, regardless of whether it's, walls and ceilings or roofing. And typically, the one thing that I see missing from a lot of them are those three provisions. So, to kind of briefly break it down for our audience, venue is where you can be sued or where somebody can sue you. So, for example, you could say, you can only sue me in, Orange County, California, right? There are certain statutes that govern that. So there's a lot of statutes in different states that say you can only sue somebody or bring suit in the county where the project is located. Okay, so that may trump anything that you have contractually. But otherwise, what I like to put in the contract is wherever your home office is, that's where the venue needs to be, because more than likely you've got local connections. You know the town, you know the people, you know the experts, and generally it's cheaper to litigate in your hometown than it is somebody else's. So think of that. The next thing is choice of law. That is what law applies to your contract and to the dispute. So, for example, if you've got a New York contractor that's doing work in Texas with a Louisiana customer, what law applies? Well, typically there probably are statutes that govern that. So a great example is statute may say Texas law applies because that's where the project is located. But depending on what cause of action you bring, that may change. That's why in the contract, I like to say choice of law is this state, regardless of any other conflict of law principles, right? And
Oh, I got it. Yeah.
that at least helps you kind of dictate what law governs. Some states have very favorable laws, other states not so much. So that's something that you need to think about. Last thing I want to mention, dispute resolution. How do you resolve a problem with a customer or with somebody else, right? I like to see typically what you're talking about is you're talking arbitration or litigation. So litigation is where you go to court, you have a judge decide or a jury decide the outcome. Arbitration is where you have an arbitrator decide it. And typically that arbitrator is somebody that knows something about construction. So what I like to do is get an opportunity to settle before you get there. I always like to say mediation first, which gives you an opportunity to potentially have some confidential communications. If you don't settle, no harm, no foul, then you go on to the next step. But you got to have all this spelled out in your contract. That's the message, is think about how do you want to resolve disputes. Don't just leave it open-ended, and get all these things in your contract.
Got it. Wow. Great advice for sure. Because if that makes sense, you want to, if someone, you want to be around people that know you and support you.
Yeah,
As if they, especially if they have to pick a jury, right? I'm assuming that's the whole point.
absolutely.
But hopefully nothing in the first place.
Right.
Stay away from altogether. Well,
Yeah.
Trent, as always, thank you so much for your insight. If anybody has any questions, where do they find you?
Sure. They can email me, trent.cotney@arlaw.com, or anywhere social at Trent Cotney.
Sounds great. And if anybody has any questions for us, it's roofingcontractor.com or wconline.com. And while you're there, make sure you sign up for all our free content, sign up for our e-newsletters so you can stay up to date on all our great content. But stay safe, away from the bees, and stay healthy. And we'll talk to you soon. Thanks again, Trent.
Thank you.